Yo, what's poppin', everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Tailor Talk Celtics with Billy Calabrese. How you doing today, Billy?
Luckily in Vegas, we don't have a lot of bridges, so I'm not jumping off.
People are going to be really sad right now. That win over Indiana the other day, the blowout win, feels like a bit of a false dawn. And it kind of makes me wonder whether or not we're going to be going through this throughout January, where it's you win one, you drop one, you win two, you drop one, you drop two, you win one. Just because of the amount of injuries there seems to be a little bit of inconsistency in just the overall performance level of some dudes, again, because they're carrying injuries. And now people are starting to press the panic button. I think it might be a bit too early, but I do get it. How are you feeling about everything?
I'm cool, calm, and collected, but man, everybody around me, everybody I talk to, all they want to say is, what's wrong with the Celtics? What's wrong with the Celtics? Like, guys, hasn't this team earned some kind of leniency? Like, we just won a championship 6 months ago. Are we really going to be panicking over regular season losses? We have 50 games left. Let's get off the ledge a little bit.
I agree. I'm completely on board with, slumps come, slumps go, people struggle. I will say that I liked Derek White's comments after Sunday's game, where he was like, we need to build habits, and when you don't build the right habits, it's very hard to change them, and you carry those habits into the postseason. Right now, they're not building good habits. Transition defense is a mess. Their off-ball defense has been atrocious. Jaylen Brown was terrible off-ball, and I feel like the more he focuses on being that main scorer and dominating on the offensive end, it kind of hinders him defensively. Sometimes he'll switch off more because he just wants to leak out early, and then he just gets backcut or beat. There's a lot of issues for me just in terms of habits on the defensive end. And if you listen to most Celtics fans, defense has been an issue since game 2 of the season. And it's just continued, and it's been different areas of defense. 1 week it's transition. 1 week it's half in the half court. Next week it's being off ball defense. Next week it's rebounding. But overall, defense has been where the issues are for me.
And it's funny because we don't have any good defensive stats to track. Because if you look in all the top 10 defensive ratings, all that, even for the month of January, we're still in the top 10 with our pretty mediocre record this month. But we see it with our eyes, and the eye test actually here is telling us something. They are not communicating. They're not in sync. There's just so many simple mistakes that are leading to easy baskets for the other team. And that's not Celtic basketball.
A lot of it comes in the pick and roll as well. They're sending two at the ball more frequently than they did last year, but no one's rotating over to pick up the roll man. So you'll send a lot of easy buckets are coming off pick and roll where the big man slips and there's already two on the ball, and now nobody's rotating over. So the big's either going to be in the paint and receive a pass inside the paint, or he's going to short roll, wait for you to overreact because now you need to scramble, and he's going to pick you apart that way. And the Celtics are really good at doing that themselves. It feels like teams have kind of taken a leaf out of their book and they're punishing them for sending two. And I don't understand, because last year, one of the biggest talking points was this team is so deep with defenders. You can guard man up all the way around the rotation and feel comfortable. So why they've started trapping more than they did last year is a real big question mark.
The one that's really standing out to me that's awful is the zone. I think we play the worst zone in the league. Now, that's just me probably exaggerating a bit, but whenever we go into zone, it's a disaster. And I know Joe keeps going to it for a reason, because we have to practice it. We have to improve on it because we're probably going to need it later on. But oh my God, it's an eyesore. Every time we go into zone, I'm like, oh, well, they're going to make a run.
The 2-3 zone, the 3-2 zone has been terrible. And last season it was a 2-1-2 press, and then they ran 2-1-2 spy. And both of those two zones were fantastic, I thought. I thought the 2-1-2 press was really good at generating mistakes. They were forcing turnovers. They were managing to force back passes or whatever it may be. 2-1-2 spy, you had Drew Holiday kind of acting as that free roaming, free safety. That worked quite well as well. This 3-2 and 2-3, they kind of interchange between the two of them on a literally moment by moment basis. They're not strict enough. Now, the key to a zone and how you spot a zone is when there's a screen or anything, nobody switches, everybody sticks with their man, and then you basically hand a guy off as they go into the next area of the zone defense. The Celtics have seemed to be a little bit too undisciplined there. They're collapsing more than what they should there. They're not trusting the guy behind them or to the side of them as much, and that comes down to communication. And I do agree that zone has been carved open easily. But again, I know we shouldn't look at last season, and Jaylen Brown said this, like, this season isn't last season. Expecting it to be last season is wrong. Expecting last season to be this season, it's not going to happen. But they've just moved away from so much of what worked and what helped them win a chip. I don't get it. Why would you move away from the type of zone that you were getting good results by and go to a type of zone where you're just getting cooked every single time?
Is it them working on something else to have another notch in the belt, or is it as simple as those zones don't work without Drew Holiday? Like the 2-1-2 press does not work unless you have White and Holiday out there. Who's going to be another level defender that's going to be able to press like that with White?
I mean, I'm just always big on, if you want Jalen, you put Jaylen Brown in that Drew Holiday spot and have him be the press guy because he's got the athleticism. I do get it, but even when Drew Holiday's been on the floor this season, we still haven't seen the 2-1-2 press. It's been a 3-2 and a 2-3. And maybe that's working on something, but again, you found what worked last season. I get needing curveballs and having some ideas and different options available. But also, don't go too far away. It's very easy to want to overcorrect things or overdevelop things. And they're going too far away from what made them such an elite team last year. By all means, have a new wrinkle here and a new wrinkle there and an option here and an option there. But don't try and reinvent everything that you do. And defensively, it feels like there's been a lot of overcorrection, specifically with not guarding man-to-man as much.
Yeah, the man-to-man defense, I mean, that's our bread and butter. I do miss them having Tatum, like, even switching on the centers more, like we did in the playoffs last year. We're seeing less and less of that. Maybe that's a wear and tear thing, especially they don't want to get Tatum banged up in December. But I thought that worked so well, and it also lets you hide some of your weaker center defenders like Kata.
Yeah, I'd agree. Cross-matching in general has been reserved for guards at the moment. Drew Holiday's your primary cross-match guy. Peyton Pritchard's done a little bit of it too. We haven't really seen Jaylen Brown cross-match much, and I'd like to, because you want his length. Now look, Jaylen Brown put himself in this position where he's now, in my opinion, the best point of attack defender you've got on that Celtics team. He's younger than Drew Holiday. He's longer, more explosive, more physical. He's not playing at that level right now, and Drew Holiday's injured, so Derek White should really be your primary cross-match guy there, and he's not being used that way at all. So now what we're finding is they are guarding centers more straight up or sending rotations over late, and those rotations have been late. And that's taken away an opportunity because, when you were cross-matching, pick and rolls got shut down early because you were switching a guard defender onto a ball handler, and it got shut down. We're not really seeing that now. The cross-matching's happening deeper in the paint away from where the action is, at which point you're screening guys out of there. And I haven't seen so much Celtics scramming guys out of the way since the early Brad Stevens era. For some reason, we've gone back to a lot of scram action, and I just don't understand why we're seeing that so much more this year.
Part of it is the other teams have coaches too, and they're making us switch more. They're making us kind of do things that we don't necessarily want to do. It's really frustrating, though, the effort part of it, because there is a lot of times they'll give up on a play. They'll just get beat because they're not talking to each other. Those are the kind of things that I think are the real glaring issues, and why, let's call it what it is. It is a middle of the season, not even middle of the season yet, but a mid-season slump. Like, this is a championship hangover. It came late, but it's there.
Yeah, and they'll figure it out. Like you said, we're about a third of the way through now of the season, if not just slightly more. They've got plenty of time to figure this stuff out. They've got plenty of time to get back on track. But it's those habits for me. The not communicating is a habit. The overhelping is a habit. The being allowed to be manipulated on switches is a habit. And the reason I pointed out scrams is because teams had coaches last year too, and they were trying to punish that switch last year, and the Celtics didn't let it happen. And they were able to guard their yard no matter who they got switched onto. That, to me, I know effort's a buzzword and all of this stuff, but that to me is literally being locked in and knowing when to switch a guy out, knowing when to trust him, and more importantly, when to send help on time. And that's the biggest part of this. The help is coming a beat or two late, and that can create, all of a sudden now you're in a scramble. Someone's got to sink and fill, and then there's somebody open, so somebody needs to rotate on the perimeter, and before you know it, someone's open around the nail to make a pass. So for me, it's more about being locked in, more about making quicker decisions. Processing speed is important on both sides of the floor. And I just feel like there's a little bit of brain fog going on right now.
Let's start to kind of pivot towards some of the positives we are seeing on defense, Jordan Walsh fits right in with this team and what they want to do. And while the offense isn't there yet, you can see how valuable having a wing that can defend is, especially as Sam still tries to get his feet back.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give a shout out to a guy on Twitter. I gave him a shout out on the last episode, but we had some technical issues, so it didn't get posted. Coach Calabrese, shout out, because he's been a Jordan Walsh truther for a minute, especially like just in terms of his athleticism, his length, and how he fits as a defensive piece on this team. We're seeing he's giving you good defensive minutes. He's a high energy guy. He's got high upside as a defender. Can play as a point of attack. Can play as a wing stopper. The only issue I've got with him right now is he's still raw. And I wrote this in yesterday's Celtics Chronicle newsletter. For all the good that Walsh does and how exciting it is to have another young guy that you maybe have hit on late in the second round, how confident do you feel going into the playoffs knowing he's your depth piece at the wing spot? And I don't want to stick on being negative. I do think that he's done a lot of good. He's definitely improved as a scorer as well as on catch and shoot. I'd like to see him be more aggressive getting to the rim, be more explosive around the rim. But overall, I still think expecting him to be a depth piece this year and your primary backup to Sam Hauser, that's a stretch too far for me.
Well, do we think he's going to play? Like, the Jays are going to play 40 minutes. That's the problem. So these reps are really for his development to be a real rotation piece next year. So I don't really think that they're planning on having him play in the playoffs. Like, even if, I mean, I guess worst case scenario, if Sam's not Sam by the playoffs, then this would happen. But I don't even think we're at that point yet. I think this is just about, hey, it's the middle of the season. These games, we're using them as practice. Let's get this guy where he to that next step.
Yeah, for sure. But that's where I say depth piece, right? This is a worst case scenario. Sam goes down. Sam isn't. They'll play Sam if he's not scoring regardless. But if he's injured and out, you're either going double big or you're using Jordan Walsh. Those are your two options available. And depending on your minute distribution towards the bigs, you might feel more comfortable putting Walsh out there in the postseason. And that's the concern. That's where my concern comes from. But in terms of just genuine growth and genuine impact, I mean, you mentioned it before we came on air. The last few games, he's been top 4 in on-off numbers because he's been making such a good impact defensively.
Yeah, and like I said, if he plays hard, he does NBA level defense. He probably still doesn't know exactly what he's doing, but he makes up for it with his hustle, his nose for the ball, his energy and effort. And I think the other guys like seeing somebody, dude, when you're running down the court with somebody that's trying their ass off, like, it makes you want to try harder too. When everybody's kind of holding their heads down and they're slacking, guess what we do? We hold our heads down and slack too. So I think Joe's even used him as kind of like a spark plug, kind of like he does with Pritchard. When the energy's kind of dropping in a game, he inserts a guy like that into the game to bring everybody else's energy levels up.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think we've seen a lot of him on offense as well. I know there's some clips going around where he's doing some stuff off the bounce and it looks good and he drives off the bounce, makes a read. There's genuine upside there, and there's a reason to want to develop him and to keep giving him those reps. Completely on board. I think that long term, having Jordan Walsh become a NBA rotation level guy is a good thing for the Celtics. He's under team control. He's on a cheap contract. His next contract will probably be quite reasonable too, because it's took a year, well, by that point, 3 years for him to develop into a valuable rotation piece. I'm all in on keeping Jordan Walsh and developing him. I just question the depth, and wing depth has been a question for me all season.
Do you question using him and developing him like this if it costs us regular season games? Because,
No.
I mean...
I think there's a difference between building winning habits and winning games. There's a big difference there. You can build winning habits and have some dogfights, do you know what I mean? Because you've got a couple of guys that are still learning and still developing, and there's just a bit of a talent drop-off when you go to that second unit, so be it. As long as you're playing a winning brand of basketball, eventually that talent will improve because it's playing more and more. Now, if you start bordering on that 20 loss mark and we're only in February, yeah, then at that point, yeah, I do start to say, all right, shut it down, start playing to win. But right now, it's more about the execution and the building of those habits and the way you're playing rather than the fact that you're trying to develop some dudes.
Well, I mean, that was the Brad Stevens mantra, right? It was more about the process than the results. And I know we don't like using that process word here in Boston. It's a Philly thing. But I mean, he is absolutely correct, because if you do have the right process and you are doing the right things, it is going to eventually lead to the right results. It might not be immediate. And sometimes development it isn't just a straight line going up. Sometimes you're going to have curves down. It's going to be like a freaking roller coaster. You're going to have the ups and downs. And I just think that we're kind of hitting a lot of those downs right now, not just with Walsh, just with just our process. Cause I do think that their process is still what it needs to be an NBA champion. It's just the results aren't matching it yet.
Dude, I say it all the time. You can have incredibly good offensive process and miss, and you can have incredibly good defensive process and get scored on. But as long as you keep doing those things well and you keep doing them the right way, eventually you're going to score more than you miss and stop more than you need to. Do you know what I mean? So you keep just plugging away, you keep playing the right way, you keep building, I hate saying it because it's such a cliche, you keep building those habits and you do it the right way, knowing that this is just a bit of a rough patch in the season. Yes, they're losing games they should win. And yes, they're losing games at a rate that we haven't become used to over the last 2 years. And I think that's why why people are panicking, not because they're losing, but because when was the last time we saw this team lose like 6-11? Do you know what I mean? It's been a long time since this team lost 6 games out of 11. And that's where we find ourselves right now. So now the panic is not so much that they're losing, but people just aren't used to having to watch the team lose this much.
Yeah, because it used to just be that like losses were so rare, we just didn't know how to react because it's like we never see them. But now that we're seeing them rapidly, people are losing their freaking minds because they forget like pretty much every NBA champion has 2-3 game losing streaks multiple times in a season, let alone, what we're doing. I mean, KP and Drew still haven't lost 3 games in a row in a Celtic uniform. So it's just something that we got to have some perspective. We do got to think about the bigger picture. But guys, there's 50 games left. Let's get away from the edge.
People are going to get healthy. You're going to see Drew start to get healthy sooner or later. Hopefully KP will get healthy. That's the biggest swing factor and always will be. As long as he's on this roster, it's how healthy can KP stay. But missing Drew, you can feel it. You can feel the impact that he makes on both sides of the floor, just being out there, being that defensive presence, being that extra playmaker, release valve on offense. They're going to get healthy. I think Drew is a big miss right now. What is it? I know the Celtics put out their injury report yesterday. I can't remember what it was because it was late when they did it. Let me just pull it up. Celtics PR. Drew Holiday is questionable. Porzingis is questionable. So both are questionable coming into today's game against the Raptors. They're probably going to sit, if we're being honest with you. Let them sit until they're 100%. The Celtics have got no need to rush them back. Maybe I'd start seeing what some of the other deep bench guys can do as well. If we're going to be like that against Toronto, especially that are young and athletic and they play physical. If you sit Drew and KP, you might as well get some Baylor Shireman or some Drew Peterson and see what they can do to fuck it, let's go crazy.
I do wonder, though, if they just want to get them just some NBA reps because they haven't played in a while. And, man, we got a weekend coming up. I mean, it's a back-to-back with Minnesota and Houston and then the big game against OKC. So those 3 games in 4 nights, I mean, that's a hell week right there. So I do wonder if maybe they want to at least get them up to game speed. And Toronto is a great punching bag for that.
Yeah. And there's a couple of guys there that could do with the boost. Like, I think Derek White could do with a big night. He's not been slumping, but he's not been thriving either. So Derek White could do with a big night. I think Jason Tatum can bounce back from that performance against Indiana. He had a really bad first half, on Sunday. Jaylen Brown needs to lock in on defense. And I feel like there's a lot of the issues right now is balance. There's just a bit of imbalance in the way guys Jalen's approaching it a bit too offensive-minded. Tatum's approaching it a little bit more passive than he was earlier in the season. Derek White's trying to find a balance without Drew Holiday next to him where he's carrying more water. I'm not concerned to the point where I'm panicking, but I do think there are some concerns that are valid at the same point, which is fair.
Yeah, whenever there's a game that Jalen takes more field goals than Tatum, I always feel like we're in for a dogfight. The games are closer than they should be. And honestly, we usually lose when it's significantly more. So like when Jalen's higher usage and Tatum's lower, it's a bad recipe. You want them both hovering just under 30% usage. And that's like, the superstar level. Now there's the Lucas and those kind of guys that do 33, 35, even 37 prime Harden. But If you keep both of them under 30, that's like the offense we run. We're not going to ever have a heliocentric offense. We're never going to have one guy having the ball that much of the time. So if they're both under 30, that's the balance we need. But the problem is when Jalen's way up here and Tatum's way down here, like we saw in this last Pacers game, everything else suffers from it. I mean, this team is built for Jason Tatum to be the man.
And sometimes he's going to have a bad night, and you need JB to step up, and you need Drew to step up, or KP to step up. But this is when you feel their absences, because especially on Sunday, in Sunday's game, Jalen didn't really have any help when Tatum was struggling because KP's off the court, Drew's off the court. So you do need to lean heavier into the Derek White and Peyton Pritchard. And I was on a podcast yesterday, I was on the NBA pod yesterday, and we were talking about just the entire structure of the Celtics team and how they've been constructed. And my take there is this team has been constructed to win now. And not just win now, they've been constructed in a way where everybody brings opportunity to the table. So when you take one or two guys away, the house of cards really starts to crumble, because now that you don't have the secondary outlets, you don't have the Kristaps Porzingis popping off a screen, you don't have the Drew Holiday in the dunker spot giving you some weird spacing that way. And when Tatum's not playing well, there's so much pressure on one guy then to be the man, like JB has to carry sometimes. It leads to a lack of balance on both sides of the floor for multiple guys as they try to expand their roles. Once one or two of KP and Drew are back consistently, I think a lot of the issues we're seeing are just going to start to dissipate.
Yeah, and we keep harping on it, but it is true because, like, we know Drew's missed 5 or 6 more games this year than last. KP has missed double that. He's missed 11 or 12, depending on if he plays tomorrow. But the one that really stands out is Sam. Sam's missed 7 more games this year than last year. And even now that he's back, he's still not himself. So that was a 45% three-point shooter that you took away from this team. And we're just trying to fill that void. And I'm sorry, there just ain't too many of those guys out there.
No, and people, well, me included, was hoping Baylor Scheinman could be a guy that you could plug in when Sam went there, and it just has that at the moment. I mean, 32 games into his rookie year, it hasn't worked out that way. Cool, okay, I get it. He's a rookie, whatever. Anton Watson was another guy you probably felt could have done that when watching the Summer League, but again, Summer League doesn't dictate NBA success. We haven't seen him at all. He wouldn't be a helpful piece right now either. When you lose a guy like Sam and then you lose Drew's corner 3-point shooting as well, like he's well off the mark from where he was last season in terms of conversion rate. Those two guys struggling when on the floor from deep has been a huge, unexpected left turn, right? It's been a sharp left. And now you're trying to figure out, how do we utilize the spacing we've got when our 2 best perimeter scorers from last season, or 2 of the best perimeter scorers from last season, can't get it done right now? It goes to more Pritchard, it goes to more Jalen, it goes to more Jason. There's a little bit more imbalance, and it's easier to help off of guys. We saw Memphis just completely disrespect Drew. Do you know what I mean? So until these guys can figure it out and find a level where they're shooting an above average 3-point percentage while staying healthy, spacing is going to be a little bit more difficult, and they're going to have to try new things offensively.
Yeah, I really like Drew Peterson. I thought he's shown a lot so far. I'd maybe even give him a couple more, little more extended looks, especially if it's against the Torontos and stuff of the world. I thought he could do a lot of Sam Hauser light, but I mean, he is a two-way guy. He's not NBA proven. It's just we've seen flashes, and flashes were pretty decent.
Yeah. Now the question is, how many of these developmental guys is Joe going to throw his weight behind and support behind? Right now, it's all Jordan Walsh, and I feel like one is more than enough in terms of just developing young talent. You're a contending team. You don't want too many of these dudes in the rotation, very often at least. I understand it. Walsh can give you a little bit of 3-point shooting, but he's also the best defender out of that entire little cohort of younger dudes. I just think that Peterson gives you the rebounding, gives you the shooting, and can fill that gap that Sam Hauser, like not to the level that Sam Hauser did or does, but he can fill that gap a little bit easier than what Walsh does. So it's weird. But if Walsh started showing more off the dribble in terms of attacking the rim and exploding and using that length and athleticism, I'd be all in on Jordan Walsh getting these minutes and just allowing him to be more of a slasher. I'm a big fan of young guys that are developing their catch and shoot shot to just focus on getting downhill more. So then defenders start sagging off them a little bit more when they catch, and then it's an easier jumper later in the year.
Going back to the Pacers games, because we haven't really talked about how the first game was a 37-point blowout in our way, and then the second game, they just completely changed how they played. It was all twos, it was all points in the paint, and they were going to just determine to beat us with the two. And we haven't seen many teams try that strategy. Do you think that more teams are going to try to implement that?
Yeah, probably, especially while there's no Kristaps Porzingis, because your rim protection's a lot weaker, right? Like, I think Al Horford does a great job protecting the rim at his age and his height, and the way he plays angles and shuts down driving lanes is just unmatched for somebody that isn't 7 foot. But when Porzingis isn't there, and when you're not really trusting Nemi, especially against a team like Indiana that play at a real high pace and like to crack you off the dribble a lot, then you go to the rack, because Nemi's not going to keep up with you if you're in front of him. If you've got Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nemhard, even TJ McConnell with the ball in their hand and they're attacking downhill, Nemi's just going to get put in a blender. So you don't really trust him there. I thought Luke Cornett done a good job of containing pick and rolls. I thought he did a good job of defending the rim a bit. But when you don't have Porzingis there as that shot deterrent, yeah, you attack. I think it makes sense to get downhill and attack and try and beat them for two, because the defense is going to keep collapsing, and then you can get your easy kickouts.
See, I don't think that there's many teams that have the personnel to do it like the Pacers did, though.
No, the Kings are probably another one because of the play-stay play. How that works without Mike Brown running the show there is going to be interesting. I think the Lakers are another one just because they're more physical when they attack downhill. The Pistons probably too. But outside of that little contingent, I think most teams will try and beat them straight up and run and gun offense from the 3-point line.
Yeah, I just think it's something specific that Carlisle could do with this roster that 28 other NBA teams just can't do, because it's not only the pace and it's not only the skill around the basket that they have with the Miles Turners and the Siakams and those kind of guys, but it's also they have the 3-point threat too. So if we pack the paint, we're going to give up threes. So it's like they would be like, here, thank you, we'll take all those threes. So there's really no way to win on that except you just have to hit your shots. You can't turn the ball over against a team like that, and you can't foul. Like, why do we defend by fouling? Like, that's our biggest, like cutting off our own head is our foul rate.
You know, another team that could do it just as good as the Pacers could because of the personnel, and it's a problem, is the Cavs. They have more skilled bigs. They have Jarrett Allen, they have Evan Mobley, they can play that way. They have 3-point shooting threats in Dean Wade. Donovan Mitchell's just crack you off the dribble. Donovan Mitchell will score from wherever the hell he wants, whenever the hell he wants. Darius Garland can set the table. I think that if the way the Pacers have played against Boston has set a good precedent for a team like Cleveland that can play that system. And that's going to be a problem for the Celtics if there's no Kristaps, because they're going to really stretch you out in terms of spacing, and they're going to punish you on the interior because they've got the size and athleticism to do so.
Here's the scary thing. Mobley's shooting like 40% from 3 right now.
Mobley's a beast, dude. It's took him a while to figure things out, but he's an absolute beast right now. And again, you need Porzingis on the floor to be able to kind of negate some of what Mobley brings. But I do think, I saw a stat yesterday. I retweeted it, actually. I want to make sure I credit it right. I think it was Caitlin Cooper. Let me have a look. It was a sad stat. I remember labeling it a sad stat. Yep, Caitlin Cooper. The Celtics won or tied the regular season series with every team in the league last season, with the exception of the Nuggets. The Pacers won this season series 2-1. And the Cavs are going to have paid attention to how the Pacers played this team, and they're going to feel like we can do that at a very similar, if not higher level, because Halliburton's not been at his best, and Donovan Mitchell is having himself a damn good year. So there are teams out there that can play a similar way. It just so happens that one team that could do it at the same level as Indiana or better is one of Boston's biggest threats right now. That's a problem.
I like the matchup of Cleveland more because I do think we can attack Garland, and it's just going to be killer whale offense. We will pick on them, and I just don't trust their bench. Like Strus, if he's healthy, obviously we know he can get hot. LeVert only seems to play well against the Celtics, but that's kind of fake. Over a course of a series, you're not going to see too much there. So like their depth, if one of those guys goes down, they're in a lot of trouble. but I mean, that's a 6-7 game series. Like, the Cavs are legit.
Yeah, and you can say that about Boston. If we're seeing it now. If one of the Celtics' main guys go down, they're in a little bit of trouble. We're seeing that less so with Porzingis because they won last year in spite of KP being injured. The only thing is, can we rely on other teams having injuries to star players at the same time, right? And that's a question mark there. Look, I'm big on the Celtics. I think they're still going to win. I think we're still going to see them in the NBA Finals. I just think it's going to be a way more difficult path, both in the regular season, as we're seeing, and during the postseason. Just because teams have got smarter, that the Celtics are trying a few new things and they're not really working right now. And they won already. They're not chasing with the same ferocity as what they were. When the playoffs come, though, I think we're going to see them really switch it on.
Yeah, it's different when you're, hunting or you're the hunter. So, like, obviously everybody's coming at our heads now because they did it. So I do expect to see, not them flip a switch, but I do think as the season goes on, gradually we'll see more and more of the Celtics that you guys are expecting.
We're in our Jennifer Lawrence season right now, man. It's the Hunger Games. We're being hunted. We're not hunting. That's what I'm going to call it from now on, the Jennifer Lawrence season. She was the one in Hunger Games, right?
She was. And anytime we can mention Jennifer Lawrence, we should, because she's awesome.
Okay. That's what we're referring to this season as the Jennifer Lawrence season. From here on out, that's what it is. That's pretty much all I've got, though. I think I'm spoke out in the negative. I'm really trying to be positive right now. But I also don't want to be the guy that's bright skies and sunny days when there's genuinely some clouds. You know what I mean? I want to try and be as fair as possible. For me, injuries are the most underrated discussion part on this team. They're also probably the most impactful part of this team. And that isn't just guys missing, that's guys carrying injuries. Jaylen Brown dealing with knee tendonitis, Sam Hauser's back issues. You can go down the list and there's everyone was quick enough to defend Tatum when he was struggling with that hairline fracture in his wrist for like 2.5 years. Seems to have been fixed now. We've got 4 or 5 guys carrying injuries that are going to take time for them to figure out how to play through them, how to play with them, or just to recover. That has an impact. Whether you like it or not, it does. Just because a guy is on the floor doesn't mean he's 100%. Factor in the fact that every team is going 100% best performance against Boston. It's a bit of a learning curve. That outside of Drew Holiday, no one on this team has had to try and defend a championship before.
Let's be honest, adversity isn't a bad thing. It's the biggest fighter of complacency. So them going through some lumps and getting humbled a little bit, getting punched in the face a few times, like, this is all really good for them, because guess what happens when the playoffs start? Every game of a series is like that. A series turns from game to game to game. You lose that game 1, you feel like the world is over, but it's not. You still got 3 more games. You still got the chance to come back. So they gotta deal with adversity instead of running from it. And I do think that's what this team does best. And come on. After all these playoff runs we've seen with this group of guys, we can't give them the benefit of the doubt.
Dude, I've just got a sneaking suspicion we're not far from a 12-game winning streak. And I don't know why it feels like 12 is the magic number here, but I think there's a 12-game winning streak right around the corner. It just feels that way, because it's going to be, once this team figures it out and they really lock back in, they're going to be right back to where they were. And I think that, this hangover has come late, and now they've had a couple of gut punches and a couple of haymakers thrown at them. They're still standing, and they're just going to come back. I just feel like they're going to switch it on for 12 games, create some separation, keep pace with the Cavs. And we're all going to be looking back like, dude, why were we even bothered?
Exactly like last January. Everybody thought the sky was falling. They couldn't believe it. Oh, you get blown out by the Hawks. Oh, you lose to this team, that team. Guys, it's a long season. There's 82 of these.
Marathon, not a sprint, baby. With that, I'm going to let everybody go. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast feed, to the YouTube channel, to the newsletter. Make sure you show Billy some love over on Twitter at
The Real Sibo.
There we go, baby. And make sure you'll know it's him, because what jersey are you wearing on the picture?
Sebastian Telfair.
There we go, baby. Right then, we'll catch you later. Peace out, everybody.